In public opinion polls conducted earlier this year, we see that the vast majority of Americans are proud to be an American. You see on this graph there are some differences between Republicans and Democrats, but over 60% of Americans, regardless of party affiliation, say that they are proud to be an American. So what's so great about being an American anyway? If you walked up to someone on the street and asked them this question, you would probably get responses like, Americans are the freest people on the earth, that this is the land of opportunity, that anyone can make something of themselves in this country. Those sentiments reflect American political culture, an overall set of values widely shared within a society. So we saw already that the political process resolves conflicts. It solves conflicts over differences in values and how we distribute our scarce resources. Of course, these conflicts emerge because we all have different life experiences and we see the world differently. However, there are some ideals that Americans hold in common. These ideals form the basis of American national identity. You can think of these ideals as like the glue that binds Americans together. You see, unlike people of other countries who share a common ancestry. For example, in Japan, 94% of the population is Japanese. Americans are a multitude of people from different lands. In the United States, about 12% of the population is foreign-born. About 64% of us are white, 15% Hispanic, 14% African American. So the basis for our national unity is not the blood that runs through our veins, but the deeply rooted values that we hold dear about our government. These are the values that define us as distinctly American. Understanding these values is key to understanding why our political system is what it is today. So let's explore some of the glue that binds Americans together. First, most Americans are very proud of the fact that we enjoy freedom in this country. We believe that people should be free to think and act and express themselves as they choose, provided, of course, that they don't step on the freedom and well-being of others. Of course, our freedoms are protected in the Bill of Rights. These are the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, which protect our freedom of speech, freedom of religion, the right to bear arms, the rights that we have if we're ever accused of a crime. Freedom, by definition, is absence of constraints on behavior. Yet, if we had absolute freedom, it would be anarchy. It would be total chaos. So in the United States, we as citizens agree to submit to the authority of our government in exchange for guarantees that the government will protect our freedoms. In other words, we believe in a constitutional system, in limiting the power of government through a written charter. The Constitution puts strict boundaries on how far the government can go to invade our individual freedoms. It gives the government enough power to create an orderly society, yet also places strict boundaries on the government from invading our personal space. The next value is equality, but how exactly are Americans equal? Of course, the Declaration of Independence states that all men are created equal. Well, if that were true, guess what? I want Bill Gates' paycheck. By equality, Americans want their government to ensure the rules of the political game are the same for everybody. For example, each person gets one vote. But the end result of success varies based on individual talent, drive, hard work, and initiative. In other words, we want the government to guarantee an equal playing field, but not necessarily guarantee equal outcomes for all of the players. We often take our own political culture for granted so much that we are not even aware of it. But when you compare the United States to other countries, it's much more evident. Other countries, even democracies, are much more committed to equality of outcomes. In fact, the United States has the largest gaps of all the countries in the world between the rich and the poor. For example, in the United States, the richest 1/5 of the population has 50% of all the nation's wealth, while the poorest 1/5 shared 3.4% of the nation's wealth. In fact, the richest 1% have 24% of all the income in the United States. Other countries like Sweden, Norway, and Denmark, the government seeks to guarantee a certain quality of life to all citizens through equalizing income. That means that they're going to tax their citizens at much higher rates than we do in the United States. In fact, the United States has one of the lowest tax rates of all countries in the world, primarily because of the next value that's part of our political culture, individualism. We believe that people can and should get ahead on their own without the support of government. We believe that anyone can pursue the American dream. This goes back to the founding of this country, where we have always been seen as the land of opportunity. People came here from Europe to conquer the frontier. Even people in Europe who were lowlifes, who were nothing, who had absolutely nothing, who were the scum of the earth, would cross the Atlantic Ocean, transport here in the United States, and all they had to do was work the land and they could be somebody. Unlike Europe, in the United States, land was plentiful. Anyone could own land and work the land and make something of themselves. This is why in the United States we're not as concerned with the large gaps between the rich and the poor, because we think that if people worked really hard, they could get ahead, which ties directly into our economic system. In the United States, we believe in free markets. We don't want the government to step in and control prices, control production of products, control profits on private corporations. Throughout the history of this country, we've been committed to a capitalist economic system, one in which private individuals and businesses own the means of productions. If these private businesses efficiently create a product for which there is a demand, they will make money and do well. Capitalist economies are driven by the hard work, initiative, and innovation of their people. In contrast, in a socialist economic system, it's not up to private individuals to produce goods and services. Instead, that's the job of government. In socialist economic systems, the government, as the producer of goods and services, plays a powerful role in setting wages and distributing wealth across society. But as a country, the United States has always rejected socialism. This is seen as a backlash against the strict, rigid class structures that many of the early colonists fled when they came to the United States in the 17th and 18th century. Lastly, Americans believe in self-government. We believe that the government should be based on the consent of the governed, but we've had differences of opinion about how exactly the people should rule. You already saw in the previous lecture that the word democracy itself comes from two Greek roots, demos and kratein, meaning the people, and to rule. So by definition, democracy is rule by the people. But to America's founding fathers in the 18th century, the term democracy meant giving people a direct vote in the laws that govern their lives. This is what we call today direct democracy. America's founding fathers derived their meaning of democracy from the Greek, where democracy meant face-to-face debate and decision-making by all citizens. Again, today we call this direct democracy, and we do have some examples, even here in Michigan. The examples that we find today include ballot initiatives. In 2016, Michiganders voted to legalize marijuana for recreational use. We, the people, got to directly vote on a law that would govern us. That's an example of direct democracy. It's worth noting that America's founding fathers despised democracy of this kind. In fact, John Adams, one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence and later the nation's second president, he said that democracy is more bloody than either aristocracy or monarchy. Remember, democracy never lasts long. It soon wastes, exhausts, and murders itself. There is never a democracy that did not commit suicide. So to people like John Adams and others of our founding fathers, democracy meant mob rule. They did not trust the ability of the masses to govern themselves. Instead, they believed that they were creating a republic or a representative democracy. This is a system of government in which the people select representatives to work and speak on their behalf in government. While many examples of direct democracy do indeed exist today, most public policy decisions are made by the officials that the people elect to represent them in government. The founding fathers believed that the passions of the people should be tempered or filtered through their elected representatives. They believed that these elected representatives would be older, wealthier, wiser than the average American, and that they would be better suited to make rational decisions on public policy. They also believed that people with property should be the ones running the government because those with property stand the most to lose should the government become corrupt. Lastly, today we've also come to expect that democracies respect minority rights. There are some rights that even the majority in a democracy cannot take away. Of course, these rights are spelled out in the Bill of Rights. Sometimes protecting these rights are incredibly controversial. For example, even though most Americans would say they support freedom of speech in theory, when it comes to protecting free speech rights of groups like the KKK or the American Nazi Party, we tend to back away from our support for freedom of speech. But it's important to note that the Bill of Rights is not intended to protect the majority. We have the democratic process that we can use to protect our rights. Instead, the Bill of Rights is intended to protect unpopular minorities. So in sum, from the beginning, the United States of America has been committed to this basic principle: the government should be ruled by the people. But over time, we have disagreed about who should rule and the extent to which the people should rule. We began as a country that excluded women, African Americans, those without property from having a voice in their government. Over time, with constitutional amendments, the American system of government has indeed become more democratic.